Hey everyone, I hope you're ready to learn some nice TvT, a little bit of cheesy TvT from Clem. He's going to be showing us how to execute a Hellion Marauder push/drop. It's actually still a macro build, but with a spicy attack kind of mixed in there that should be able to surprise your opponents. So go ahead and start by sending your first SCV to build your supply depot. Refinery. Barracks. Send an SCV out to scout. With your barracks done, build a Reaper and an Orbital. Build your CC if you see a barracks back in their home base. If there is no barracks, do not plant that CC down. Instead, build a factory. Speaking of which, build a factory now. Reactor on the barracks. Depot to fully wall off. Second refinery. Be careful with your Reaper. It's currently your only form of defense. Swap the factory with the barracks and build a starport. Start your Hellion production. We're going to make a total of 6, and then add a tech lab to the barracks. Get an orbital at that natural. Build Marauders, a total of 2. Start Marauder slow. Build a MEDIVAC. You're going to have a slight delay in your SCV production to afford all of these Hellions. That's okay. Make sure not to get supply blocked. Grab a third refinery. Medivac should be popping out now. Pick up those Marauders, add a tech lab to the starport, and send your units across the map. Swap your factory and barracks. Start up some tanks, Cyclone actually, and some Marines. At this point, your attack should hit. Build a Raven back at home. Determine the best way to utilize your attack. As you can see, Clem tried to go for a tank, tried to go to the natural. Just trying to find openings. With the Cyclone finished, go into tank production. Grab a third command center. Grab a fourth refinery. And continue macroing. So building SCVs, swapping your barracks and starport to get stim or Vikings, getting barracks, engineering bays, you know the drill. On to the build discussion. Strength of the build. The Hellion opener really helps against early aggression, so if you're losing a lot of TvTs just because you're facing people who are factory expanding or straight up one basing and doing some like Reaper Hellion pressure to you, the reactored Hellions should really help you out here, as well as the Marauders with Marauders slow. They're usually not the go-to defense in the early game, but they would help if you're being attacked. It's not going to necessarily help you against a proxy 2-racks though, and that's where the scout comes in. So if you do scout that they don't have a barracks back at home, their home that is, then you should not grab your command center, but rather a factory and a second gas, and prepare your defense. This build is unexpected. It's still kind of new. I mean, I've seen it every now and again, so I don't want to say that it's new, but it's not something you'll often see. It can backfire, and it does delay a lot of things, but we'll get into that later. The point is it's unexpected, so you might actually get a couple of free wins from this. You can still macro out of it. You know, obviously Clem was able to get into a third CC. This does have to do with how long his pressure lasted. If you just immediately give away all 9 of your units, you're not going to be in a good situation. So consider not just damage done with this build, but also how long you're bothering your Terran opponent and what you're scouting too, to see if they're going to attack you or if they're just, you know, focusing on the defense. Now the weaknesses. Good defense is absolutely possible. It is tricky though. It's not the easiest build to scout. You know, you don't really have a lot of things scouting those Hellions since the Reaper should be dying to the first 2 Hellions that pop out. So it can be tricky, but a good defense is actually really possible. A Cyclone locks onto your MEDIVAC and it already gets half injured before, you know, even unloading. It's not going to turn out well. If there's a bunker in the natural and any type of wall, also something that's going to be difficult to deal with. And depending on what they actually are getting as, you know, units to defend, it can be easier or more difficult. There's a big delay on barracks production. You are not actually going to have a lot of units yourself, especially after your attack dies. Again, all those units die eventually. You're not going to have a lot to work with, where maybe if they're holding well enough and getting their production down, you could be in trouble against like a 2-base Terran. So it can still macro, but it's not the easiest macro. It requires good micro and multitasking. So behind all of that micro we saw from Clem, he had good macro, even, you know, the amount that he could have, that is. He was still affording a lot of expensive things while doing that attack, but more importantly, he was able to macro and micro. And the micro was pretty good. The micro saved a lot of units so that it lasted like over a minute. And he was continuing to find ways to do damage. So not just suiciding the Hellions, not just suiciding the Marauders, not just letting the Marauders die, he was microing them individually. If you can't do that, you are kind of hoping more so that the blitz aspect of this build will work for you. But the good news is it can. The good news is a blitz sometimes will just win you the game. So I'd still suggest this build just to mix up your TvT and have some more fun. Tips and tricks. Be willing to change up what goes into the MEDIVAC. You know, we started off with the Marauders, and that's fine. You could have also done a Hellion drop and then brought the Marauders like in the MEDIVAC to the front and done something weird like that. We saw Clem swap the Marauder drop to the Hellion drop when his Marauders were dead. MEDIVAC staying alive is a pretty crucial point of just having that attack continue. If it dies to a Cyclone lock-on or a Viking, you're not going to be able to do as much. So try and keep that alive. Marauder slow can target important units such as a Cyclone or unsieged tank. Now that Cyclone's going to be tricky because if it gets the lock on and you don't have room to actually drop the Marauders out, you know, you're over dead space, it could be totally not in your favor. But sometimes it is very effective. The Cyclone locks on, but then the Marauders, you know, get the Marauder slow on it. The Medivac gets microed away. Again, if you have good micro, Cyclone actually dies. And that Cyclone is a pretty key ingredient to the early game TvT defense a lot of the time, as well as a tank, which you can either drop on if it's sieged, get into that dead zone, or again, take it out with Marauder slow because it can't really micro away. The Hellions can suicide into the natural, but consider keeping them alive and doing second drops, third drops, more harassment, even scouting with some of those Hellions. Just, again, the idea that you can blitz with this is it's not wrong. You can go ahead and just try to win, and it might go ahead and win for you. But if you're looking to incorporate this into a macro game, you're going to want to be at a certain skill level probably to really have a good time with it and not just immediately die to a bunch of counterattacks. And you're going to want to have good micro. So it's the pros and cons. I would say this is a more difficult build to do in general, but as I was saying before, it's also just kind of fun just to mix things up, so try it. I hope this guide helps you guys. TvT can be very, very cruel, so at least this gives you the opportunity to be that cruel person in TvT and I guess flip the narrative, right? And mostly I hope that it helps you with your macro as you have the benchmarks to try and hit. So have fun on ladder, guys, win some more TvTs, and I'll see you next time.